Dijeron negro y todos me señalaron. Dijeron igualdad, pero esta vez me separaron. Dijeron mucho, pero no se olvidaron de callarse. Cuánto odio por mi piel sembraron. Dijeron historia y la tergiversaron. Dijeron guerra, muerte, odio y nos culparon. Enfermedades, epidemias nos contagiaron. Exterminación de mi fauna complace a tus mercados. Dijeron riqueza y todos se lo robaron. Oro, platino, diamante, a la fuerza se lo llevaron. Y la actualidad es tan triste que todo aquello que dijeron es lo mismo que hoy se dice más. ¿Quién dice, quién explota, quién se beneficia? El asesino, el mismo que da las noticias. Hay una cuenta fácil que siempre me da las grandes riquezas, de dónde vienen y hacia dónde van.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao. Nati Dre es afroresistencia, cultura ancestral, afrodescendencia, solidaridad. Esa es la esencia, la diáspora africana eleva la conciencia, conciencia negra, universal, progresista y transcultural. Negros y mestizos revolucionando, pueblos caribeños y africanos en un solo bando. No más explotación, colonialismo interno, no más confusión, supremacía blanca en el Babilón. Soy rojo, negro y verde, afroliberación. Mientras más negro, más represión. Somos creadores, recupera tu visión. Mi visión es educar con amor, contra el silencio, vivo sin temor. Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao, independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao,
como los Mao Mao. Somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Hello. Rise up, everybody.
Rise up.
How's everybody doing? Fernando, Bouna, Ikemba?
All good, brother.
Yep. Another day. Black Power Media feeling great, man. I'm here for the chair, man. They told me Kalonji wasn't going to be here, so I was like, it's my opportunity to come for the throne. So.
Yes. So Kalonji, don't want to put anything personal out there, but Kalonji will not be with us today. But we do have a guest. We do have Fernando's back. We do have a guest, a packed show for you guys. Hope everybody in the chat is doing good. If you guys could like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff for us. It helps the algorithm. I'm gonna pass this over to yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear and see us? I'm gonna pass this over to Bouna, as this conversation today is tailored around a guest that you're going to be having on. So for one, thank you for that. But if you could, for the viewers, just kind of go over what today's show is going to be about, and what we're going to be getting into today.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. As you're all aware, there has been an ongoing genocide over the past 9 months against our brothers and sisters in Palestine. I say brothers and sisters in Palestine because too often, this is something that is very unfortunate. We hear some of our brothers and sisters claiming that what's going on in Palestine is not relevant to our own struggle. And I think they're fundamentally mistaken for two reasons. First of all, because the Palestinians are treated the way they're treated because they're non-whites, okay? They're not considered non-whites. And also because they're not considered Westerners, right? So Israel identifies itself as a Western nation. This is why when the President Biden went to Israel a few days actually after the beginning of the genocidal campaign, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, actually say that they're fighting. It's a fight between civilization and barbarism, right? Civilization meaning Western civilization. Okay, so you can be pretty sure that whatever they're doing to Palestinians is something that they can perfectly do with the black people. And second reason why I think those who claim that the what's going on in the Middle East is not relevant to us is because they're overlooking or they willingly or not the long tradition of solidarity between black freedom struggle and the struggle for the liberation of Palestinian people. And actually, one of the little known aspects of that history is the long Zionist tradition of attacking Black freedom movements. Okay, so I wanted to start with a story that probably all the hosts here are aware of, but maybe some of our comrades, brothers, and sisters in the audience might not be aware of. So it's an article that was published by the Boston Review. I think it was back in in 2000 was it 2000 yeah 2019. So it's only 6 years old. So I'm going to try and share my screen. So the article is titled. Uh, Let me know if you guys can see my screen now. Okay, should be okay now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the article is titled "The Anti-Defamation League is not what it seems." So you're all aware of what the Anti-Defamation League is. It's an organization that was set up in the 1930s, which claims to be a civil rights organization that is fighting, anti-Semitism and all forms of hate, quote unquote. But in reality, the ADL, like all pro-Israel Zionist organization in the U.S., have a long tradition of spying, undermining Black liberation movement. So in this article, they talk about Roy Bullock, okay, who was an ADL spy recruited by the ADL in the 1960s, in 1970s, late 1970s and 1980s. So his job was to infiltrate the Black liberation and Arab liberation movements, so movement that were in solidarity with the Palestinian people, on behalf of two governments. Okay, so the governments of the apartheid South Africa and Israel. So in this context, Roy Bullock provided a lot of information. He leaked a lot of information to the governments of the U.S. government, the government of Israel, and the apartheid South Africa back then. Apartheid South Africa, which, by the way, back then was the main ally of Israel. Okay, because as you all know, Israel has been at that time, starting from the late 1970s, one of the main suppliers of weapons to apartheid South Africa, despite the fact that that regime was under international sanctions, and also despite the fact that the Israeli leaders were publicly condemning the regime for its racism, for its white supremacy, while at the same time, maintaining covert, strong relationships with that diabolical regime, which was responsible for the oppression of millions of brothers and sisters, not only in South Africa, but also in Namibia, Angola, ex-Rhodesia, which has become Zimbabwe, etc. So I'm just going to quote one paragraph from this article, which talks about how the ADL has actually spied on Black liberation movements. So here it says that in total, the raid, well, here they're talking about the raid that the FBI conducted in the 1980s. So they say that the raid found dossiers on nearly 950 organizations and 10,000 activists. An FBI interview with ADL spy Roy Bullock indicated that the information has been shared with South African apartheid government and the Israeli Mossad. In response to a lawsuit, the ADL held the surveillance was admissible research because it was performed by a so-called journalist, quote unquote, and a judge agreed. Okay. So this is the first story that I wanted to start with because, like I said, I think we have a lot of brothers and sisters out there who ignore or overlook the long tradition of Zionist oppression, infiltration, and undermining Black liberation movement. So that's one of the reasons why I thought it was so important for us to have a session dedicated to the resistance against Israeli genocide from a Pan African perspective.
Mhm.
Obviously, our guest is Palestinian. He's based in Canada, but he was born in Palestine. He was raised there. So he's one of the faces and voices of Palestinian resistance. So that's why I thought it was very important for us to have him on the show today, because this is, as you know, an anti-colonial show, a Pan-African show, an international show where we show solidarity with our brothers and sisters who basically share the same fate um, as black people and indigenous people in the US. So this was my very long introduction. I tend to do, no questions, but this time was a long introduction, right? So
No,
yeah,
no, no, no. As per usual, we get the very elaborate analysis and breakdown of what's going on wherever and whatever the topic may be. We see the Fernando's back. How you doing, Fernando?
Peace. I'm good, man. I'm sorry about that. I had a little technical difficulty right
come on,
before the
man.
show,
We
but
all know you did it on purpose, man,
I'm here. Man.
because you're afraid of the Zionist lobby in France, right?
I'm here.
You're like, what were you doing that show with that black guy with the keffiyeh?
I'm here, man. Nah, it's too late to be afraid, man. I'm here.
Yeah, to kind of help you out since your computer, almost took a shit on you.
Not almost. I had to restart the whole
He
joint.
said I had to restart.
I'm here.
All.
I'm here, man. What's good? Everybody good?
Just to fill you in, Bouna, broke down how, for people who don't know what's going on, how Zionism has always meddled its way into Black African liberation. Has always thwarted anti-colonial radical movements, and so something that very, very is essential, very vital to the conversation. If we can have like a roundabout conversation, before we shoot to a break for Black Power, what are your guys' thoughts on that current narrative that's going on right now? I could start with the first with Ikemba, the narrative that Palestinian struggle or any other struggle abroad is not intrinsically connected to African struggle. Whether that be the Sudanese, whether that be what's going on in the Congo, Palestine, whatever it may be, we have this preconceived notion that every struggle is its own struggle, and it has no connections to what we all know is one of the primary contradictions that's going on right now that we should have is, against white hegemony and settler colonialism, and that being the primary, product of all of this, the root of it all. So Ikemba, if you could, like, just from where you're at, in Philly, how do you feel about it? People not really understanding what true anti-colonial work is. I know you have your own show. We charge colonialisms, so how do you guys, circumvent, these false ass narratives that our struggles are not connected? And then pass it over to Fernando. Fernando will be since Bouna gave us his interpretation and everything, analysis. So you there, Ikemba?
He's muted. He's muted.
You're muted, brother.
Yeah, to try to break this down in a couple of minutes, because a lot of people still probably won't get it or understand, but it takes a level of consciousness just to know how the system works. It's an international system. It was born as an international system, and we're all a part of it. We all have been impacted by imperialism and colonialism. These empires, British Empire, the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, that covered most of if not all of the non-European world. They have designed the system that's still in place to this day. It may look a lot different, but this international system that has been created is oppressing and exploiting the peoples and resources of the earth and the people. And so when we look at an international system and how they're working together to maintain the system of colonialism, we have to understand that all of us, in order to overturn the system, all of us, all the working class, the poor, no matter where we are, we have to unite against this international system in order to destroy it. So a struggle in Israel against apartheid, against colonialism, if we don't unite with that struggle, and against the same enemy, the same common enemy, then it's going to be a lot difficult for us to destroy the system wherever it is. It's like what's that saying? Oppression. I'm kind of, but what Dr. King said, injustice. When he talked about injustice, somewhere I'm butchering it, but it's injustice everywhere.
Yeah.
That will help you with that one. But it's the same thing. Colonialism, anywhere is colonialism everywhere. But the last thing, to this point is just if you look at even the multinational corporations that are exploiting Africans, exploiting indigenous people all over the earth. These are business people who represent different nationalities. These are Israelis. These are Australians. These are, the white Australians, the colonizer Australians. These are Americans that are coming together, forming these multinational corporations, right? Of different nationalities, different ethnicities, and exploiting the people of Africa, exploiting the people of Palestine, exploiting the workers of Asia and of Latin America. So I think it's very important that we understand how the system works and come together. I know it's long-winded on this one, but coming together and struggling against this common enemy.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I agree with you, brother, 100%. Definitely the oppression is global, and therefore the struggle must be global. There's no other way to go about it. And if we don't understand that, we're not going to get liberated on our own little corner. Of course, that doesn't mean, we have to do local work, but we have to understand that, the mission is the struggle as a whole is global, and we have to understand that. And we have to be connected, especially as Africans everywhere. We have to connect our organizations and work together, and that's the only way we're gonna be able to get to liberation, right? But as far as certain people not necessarily understanding, not connecting the dots between Palestinian liberation and our struggle as Africans, I think sometimes it may come from there's a truth, which is that no matter where we are at, Africans, we always find ourselves at the bottom. We know that, like, I don't remember who said this, but anti-blackness is the only world's ideology. Everybody understands anti-blackness, and they all work with that. No matter where you're at on the globe, African people, you're gonna find our brothers and sisters at the bottom, pretty much, of every society, right? So certain people may not see the connection. If, like Ikemba said, we have to do the studying. We have to understand where the struggle comes from. We have to understand what our ancestors, what our freedom fighters have been through. We have to understand how Palestinian struggle has supported our struggle and how we have supported their struggle, from Malcolm X to Thomas Sankara, right? Mandela, the Black Panthers. You understand what I'm saying? So if we don't know our history, then we may be stuck in somewhere where we think, nah, this has nothing to do with us or whatever, But if we understand who we are, where we come from, and we get that political education, and we should understand what's going on. And today, as we see how things are going, it's crucial for us to understand that like you said, imperialism is not a local thing. It's a global thing. No. We have to understand that. We have to struggle against it, So
yeah, the King quote, because nobody was helping me, man, is injustice. Injustice.
You looked it up, huh? You looked it up.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. All right.
That's it. Yeah.
I was sounding crazy with that one, but I don't.
No, in a good book for everybody to if even to the host, if you guys haven't read it, Black Power and Palestine.
Yeah, that's an excellent book.
Is a really good book for individuals to understand the struggle between our people and the Palestinians. and a plethora of others as well in the mix of that book being created. Another book just on the on Palestinian struggle. I would recommend any Edward Said book that doesn't talk about a two-state solution. Yeah. I would recommend also fundamentals of I'm forgetting. Maybe you guys can help me out with this. Fundamentals to the see now I'm in the spot. See, this is payback for not helping Ikemba out. But as soon as we come back from this Black Power break for Black Power, I guarantee you I will have the book name. But yeah, we're gonna take a break for Black Power. In the meantime, enjoy some very wise and dialectical words from the late, or from the great, not the late, the great Dr. Horne.
The mistakes our radical so-called ancestors have made is that they looked at the Jewish community of Europe and saw how that they were suffering, persecuted. And then they looked at the Jewish community of North America and saw how the persecution was much less. And they came to the conclusion that the United States must be more progressive than Europe. But since they didn't have a conception of settler colonialism and didn't have a conception of white supremacy, that is to say that the settlers here in North America needed every warm European body they could muster in order to subdue the Native Americans, keep the Africans in line. And so therefore they made a deal with the Jewish diaspora. Now, what's interesting about that as well is that if you look at the writings of these settlers in the 18th century, when they were talking about a First Amendment with regard to religious freedom, they put it in the context of needing more European settlers, not necessarily in terms of some sort of Enlightenment idea that we're more progressive than Europe. Just like if you look at the Second Amendment with regard to the right to bear arms, they made it clear that they wanted settlers to be armed so that they could shoot Native Americans and shoot Africans. And of course, there was no Second Amendment for Black people in late 18th century, early 19th century. A strategic objective of the settlers was to keep arms out of the hands of the Native Americans. Even if you go back and look at Westerns, this genre of Hollywood movies, oftentimes there's a plot twist about some diabolical settler who's selling arms to Native Americans, and you're supposed to boo and hiss as a direct result. And so you see this entente between the Jewish diaspora and the United States. There are bumps in the road, for example, but we have to acknowledge that many Jewish people were able to reach extraordinary heights. I'm thinking of David Yulee. I don't know, are you a pro football fan?
Sorry about that. I'm a Bengals fan.
Okay, so you know about the Tennessee Titans, right?
Yes, I do, yeah.
You're familiar with their running back, Derrick Henry?
Yes, I am.
He's from Yulee, Florida, Yulee. David Yulee was of Jewish ancestry, was one of the leaders of Florida, one of the leaders in the depredations inflicted upon the indigenous of Florida. Recall that there was a de facto alliance between the people we call the Seminoles and the Blacks of Florida, which was quite harmful to the interests of the settlers. That's one of the reasons why David Yulee was elected to high office, even though he happened to be Jewish. Judah Benjamin was a leader of the Confederate States of America, which of course rebelled against the United States in order to perpetuate enslavement of Africans forevermore. He happened to be Jewish as well. Now, of course, there are bumps in the road. You might recall the Leo Frank case about a century or so ago in Georgia, when a Jewish man is lynched based upon a blood libel. Interestingly enough, the Israeli authorities are cheapening that serious phrase by saying that South Africa is engaged in a blood libel by dragging Israel into the dock at The Hague. Blood libel was this European canard that Jewish folk killed Christians to drink their blood. So Leo Frank was lynched because of blood libel in Georgia. Interestingly enough, and this is a tip to our scholars in the audience, we really need a new history of the Leo Frank case, because the current histories do not point to something that's quite curious, which is that the Frank defense tried to blame the killing of the Christian girl, Mary Fagan, on the black janitor. But that defense was not accepted, interestingly enough. And Leo Frank was lynched. We need a story, a new history that takes that into account. But that then brings us, of course, to the end of World War I. And Turkey, which had been the occupying power in historic Palestine, is on the losing end of World War I. Britain is on the winning end. They cut a deal with the Jewish diaspora with the Balfour Declaration, promising a Jewish homeland in historic Palestine, although, of course, Zionism, which arises at the end of the 19th century under the leadership of Theodor Herzl, Herzl, not only had the historic Palestine as a possible Jewish homeland, but they looked at Africa, they looked at Madagascar, Uganda, etc. But in any case, that leads to an influx of the Jewish diaspora into historic Palestine, setting off conflict with the Arab population. Nonetheless, as a result of the Holocaust, there's quite a bit of sympathy for the Jewish population in Europe in particular. And so the United Nations votes 1947, 1948, that there should be two states, a Palestinian state and a Jewish state. The former does not come into existence for various reasons. And that leads to the present crisis that we're now facing. U.S., of course, was one of the first states to recognize Israel. And once again, you cannot understand that, nor understand why the United States continues to wield its veto in the Security Council on behalf of Israel without understanding this long-standing, centuries-long relationship between the Jewish diaspora and settler colonialism under first the British flag and then the U.S. flag.
So that was Gerald Horne, Dr. Gerald Horne from the University of Houston.
On the Indigenous Nightmare Network.
Yeah. You're a great host.
Okay.
Yo, the interviewer did look familiar.
Right.
Like, yo, I know that dude.
Yeah, I had Gerald Horne on a couple times, and that was actually one of the great the better conversations to just keep it simple. If we can just have a roundabout conversation about the importance of Gerald Horne, and recently facing backlash from Zionists who don't like the fact that he's speaking so elegantly, so profound when it comes to his solidarity with the Palestinian people, and how, again, the topic today is how he's intrinsically connected. Our struggle is intrinsically connected to the Palestinian struggle. So if I could start off with Bouna, and then we will go around to Ikemba, Fernando or Ikemba. You guys can take it, whoever wants to after that.
Bouna should get the drum roll, man.
No, I was wondering why I'm the only one who's always starting. But anyways, this is a spot that has been set up even before the show, right? Anyways, I think we should share the link in the chat or in the description to this very important show that was hosted by our comrade Isaac. I think it's one of the best interviews I've watched in the following weeks after October 7th. Okay, because he gave a lot of historical context, and he mentioned some of the historical facts that, like we said in the first part of the show, are often overlooked. He talked about historical deal between the Jewish diaspora and the settler colonial regime in the US, because one of the characteristics of Zionist propaganda is that it is based on victimhood narrative, okay, that is not necessarily consistent with the actual attitudes of, the Jewish diaspora in the US or even in Africa, okay? Because remember, one of the largest Jewish diaspora in the world, or even one of the most affluent diasporas in the world, was in South Africa, okay? So what happened in South Africa was that you had a minority of Jewish South Africans who were overrepresented in the freedom struggle. We'll be playing a video from Ronnie Cosfield, who is still in the land of living, who was one of those Jews who were involved in the freedoms in the freedom Black liberation movement in South Africa, despite the fact that he was white. But there are others like him. There were others like him. Who first was assassinated in 1982 in Maputo, Mozambique. Her husband, Joe Slovo, who was one of the who's the chair of the South African Communist Party and the armed wing of the ANC, Mkhonto we Sizwe. But those were a minority of the Jewish diaspora in South Africa that had decided to side with the regime, oppressive regime that was oppressing Black people, okay, for the sake of preserving their own white privilege. Okay, so Gerald Horne is, proposing a narrative, okay, is coming up with a narrative that is studying the historical record that some people have an interest in falsifying. And Gerald Horne, as you said, he's a very important activist and elder of ours. I'm very grateful for his work, and I think that we should definitely try to, do our best to have him on the show. And when he talks about the Zionist lobby, he knows what he's talking about, because you talked about the recent backlash against his position on the, genocide in Gaza. But this is not something new. In the 1970s, in the late 1970s and 80s, he was as a president of the National Conference of Black Lawyers. He was under direct attack from the Zionist lobby because he was involved in the solidarity movement with our brothers and sisters in South Africa who are fighting the apartheid regime. And as they were, involved in the anti-apartheid struggle, they found out that Israel was directly involved in supporting militarily, economically, ideologically the white supremacist colonialist regime of apartheid South Africa. And it is in this context, okay, that they receive a severe black backlash from the Zionist lobby there, including the ADL, because the infiltration that we were talking about, Gerald Horne has been a direct victim of that infiltration because he had a personal interaction with Roy Bullock. Remember the spy that we talked about in the first part of the show, and there were like press, articles on the National Conference of Black Lawyers being composed of Black anti-Semites, and there were also a whole narrative that was built by the Zionist lobby, claiming that there was black anti-Semitism, was becoming pervasive. Okay, so in order to deflect the criticism against the criminal state of Israel for siding with the apartheid regime of South Africa, what they did, the Zionist lobby, was to build a whole narrative, not only denying the reality of those relations, but also attacking all the Black people who are involved in the anti-colonial solidarity movement with our brothers and sisters in South Africa, and also criticizing Israel for being South Africa's main ally. And it is in this context that Gerald Horne wrote in a very important book that we will recommend to our audience, which is titled White Supremacy Confronted. He wrote about his experience about, in the National Conference of Black Lawyers and how they've been attacked by the Zionist lobby. So there is a quote that will be probably read by Fernando that will project to the screen that people can find on the aforementioned book, White Supremacy Confronted.
Right. So Dr. Gerald Horne says, and I quote, "As Israel came under fire from African American for collusion with apartheid, charges of anti-Semitism rose accordingly. The Reverend Jesse Jackson became a repeated target for what the hardline Young Americans for Freedom called his anti-Jewish racist sentiments and his active support for Soviet-backed terrorist groups, the ANC and SWAPO. The charge that critics of Israel were bigoted did not seem to hate the searching inquiry about the relationship between Zionism and apartheid. Interestingly, as Afro-Americans spoke out more vigorously about Palestine and Israel's collaboration with apartheid, there began to emerge more stories about purported Black anti-Semitism, though rarely was the real anti-Jewish fervor of Pretoria a topic in the mainstream press. Excuse me, my screen is over here a little small. But yeah, is that it?
Yeah. So thank you, Fernando. So yeah, this is one among the many codes that people will find white supremacy confronted, in which Gerald Horne, back then as the president of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, had to deal with the Zionist lobby, which they're still using the same dirty tricks, okay, to discredit all Black people who are showing support to the people of Palestine. And this is also maybe one of the reasons why so many of our brothers and sisters are reluctant when it comes to denouncing the oppressive colonial white supremacist regime of the settler colonial state of Israel. So this is also maybe part of the explanation, because people are just afraid to go through the same experience that Gerald Horne and his comrades went through.
Yeah, no, thank you for this quote, and for well, first, Fernando, if you could, give some words to what your experience is with Gerald Horne, and just the importance of his work throughout the years, pertaining to Black struggle, pertaining to getting our diaspora to understanding what true liberation looks like, what true decolonization looks like. What's your experiences to that?
Nah, I mean, I think, Gerald Horne's work is extremely important. I've had the opportunity to, like Bouna said, your interview was really amazing. With Mayebuye, which is Bouna's podcast, we had the opportunity to interact with him a couple of times. And I think like his work is extremely important, because he's right on point, he's precise, and he gives you a perspective that's not out there, but that's very much needed. Right. But I think it's like Bouna says, it's a perspective that you will never, it's not going to be out there. And when we are able to interact with Gerald Horne or any other of our elders that has that kind of knowledge and living, because a lot of this are things that he lived, you know what I mean? He has lived through a lot. And you were telling me the other day, how many books did he write, Bouna?
47.
47 books.
It's probably 48 now, because his latest book came out like 2 months ago.
Exactly.
Black Panthers in Southern California.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so, and all of his books, and most of his books are also, they're long books. They're long, and but they're extreme. His
you didn't say that because people might be, intimidated.
No, I mean it's good work. It's necessary work. That's what I mean to say. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Just wanted to add. Sorry, go ahead, Isaac.
No. I just wanted to compound on what you guys have already said about Gerald Horne in the context of his contributions to our diaspora, an individual that since the 70s has been facing backlash from the Anti-Defamation League, which we all know works in reciprocity with white hegemony. But in the midst of all of that, been able to 47, almost 48 books now, if I'm not mistaken, give or take, just because of how much he's able to write for us at, even at this stage of his life, is very, very vital and important. And we have, in the midst of his work being put out there, we have individuals that work in reciprocity with white hegemony to try and destroy his name, to try and devalue his integrity, his importance to our struggle. And so I just wanted to compound on what everything you guys had said, is that it's very much true that even in the midst of his great work, he is still, facing backlash. He's still, you know, going through all of this, but at the same time willing to make, you know, open airtime for individual podcasts that are lower ranking like mine. I'm not a big podcast, you know. I'm very much thankful for that interview, because for almost 5,000 people to watch that interview, to engage with it and whatnot. And I thank you guys for your guys' words. You know, I didn't really necessarily see that interview as that, so to hear other individuals talk about it is, you know, it's always kind. But yeah, no, Gerald Horne is someone who we want on this show. We want to give, you know, to continue to give further analysis. And you can check out, you know, Gerald Horne's work on the Activist News Network. That's, you know, a place where you can always find relevant content from Gerald Horne. And again, his books, I'm pretty sure he's working on 49 and 50 right now. That'll probably come out in the next two months or so.
Coming out, at least next year. He has two books coming out.
Yeah. So before we go to break, though, I know that you had some words to say, Bouna. So I want to pass.
So just to build on what you said, Gerald Horne, very important work, and he's not only a writer; he's also a political activist who was willing to take some risk or even sacrifice his career. And I would also recommend our audience to check out, you know, Gerald Horne interviews. Most of them are published on the Activist News Network YouTube channel, so people can find most of the shows that we were talking about, including the webinar on Black liberation struggle in Palestine that we did with, I think Fernando was also there too. Was it in November? I think, it was in back in November.
I think it was November.
Yeah, November 2023. But anyways, Gerald Horne's work is all over the place, so you can follow his Facebook page, his like Activist News Network, like I said, and you know, read his work, because very important. One of the projects that I'll be working on, and I hope I will get the help from brothers and sisters who are French speaking, is to get Gerald Horne's work translated into French. Okay, because this is the language that most of the people we're working with are familiar with, and he has only one book translated in French, and it's not the least important book. Is his biography of Paul Robeson, which is a fundamental book that everybody should read. I actually was invited to Caracas 2 months ago. No, sorry, last month, before the election, and I did talk about the legacy of Paul Robeson in the anti-colonial and revolutionary, as part of the anti-colonial and revolutionary tradition of Black people. And I just wanted to conclude giving another example of why our solidarity with the people of Palestine is not based on abstract, you know, solidarity or abstract conceptions of anti-colonial solidarity. It's based on concrete, you know, policies that are directly affecting both the people of Palestine and also our people in the diaspora, in the continent. Because, as you know, one of the reasons why I think it is so important for us as people of African descent, as people from historically oppressed groups, is that the Israeli settler colonial regime, the criminal regime, the genocidal regime, is testing on Palestinians technologies that are then exported to the rest of the world. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2022 there was a memo of the ADL that was leaked. Okay, where there was an internal debate within the ADL to whether they should suspend or continue the exchange programs between the Israeli army and police and the police officers of the US. I don't know if you guys remember. After George Floyd was killed. So there was an internal debate within the ADL, and those, you know, I was about to use the swear word. They were you know, they were debating whether or not they should continue facilitating those exchanges with the police officers and army in Israel. So you see, it's the same technologies that are first practiced on the Palestinians that are then exported to the rest of the world and has a direct impact on the lives of our brothers and sisters. And if people are interested, they can read an excellent report that was written by a network of solidarity that is called the Deadly Exchange, which explains how the technologies that are you know, implemented in Palestine are then exported to the rest of the world and affecting particularly people like us, our brothers and sisters, who are killed by police officers who are trained in Israel.
Yeah, which is I'm glad that you made that connection, because one of the hosts of Rise Up Morning Show International, Kalonji Changa has a book that's coming out called Beyond Cop Cities with Dr. Joy James. Unfortunately, Kalonji wasn't able to make it today, but again, we'll be back as always a part of the Rise Up show, as will always be Black Power Media. I gotta keep that a buck. I really do love the fact that you tied that into the cop cities, but I do know that we have to go to break because our guest is here. So when we get back, Bouna will be on the mic to introduce our guests, and we will get into the better half of this conversation, as we are all excited to have our guest on. So in the meantime, this is going to be a special break for Black Power, as I want to give props to Bouna for creating this video and whatnot. So yeah, thank you. Break for Black Power. Rise up.
Rise
Rise
up.
up.
Concluyente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao, como los Mao Mao, como los Mao Mao, somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
And let me remind ourselves of the great warrior Spartacus, the slave who would not live a slave and had the right to resist and rose up against the Romans, and in battle those warrior slaves were smitten and dying on the battlefield, and the Romans were looking for Spartacus. Where is Spartacus? And a Saracen warrior said, I am Spartacus. Where is Spartacus? And a Philistine slave warrior said, I am Spartacus. And by God, a Hebrew warrior slave said, I am Spartacus. We are all Gaza. We are all West Bank. We are all 1948 Palestine. We are the refugees in the camps. We are Palestine, and we stand with Palestine. And we will not allow, we will do everything we can to stop the Gaza open-air concentration camp. We say it to you, Israeli Zionists and your supporters, your Americans and whatever. We will not allow that open-air concentration camp in Gaza or the West Bank or the refugee camps to become extermination camps. That is to do or die. And we have in such pride to be here with our sister, the great warrior of Palestine, Layla Khaled. And we rise to you, Layla. We rise to you as we did with Naledi Pandor's father, who was a mentor of mine, in exile, a leader of our Communist Party then, and of the ANC. And I was saying to our minister, our brave foreign minister, who was a child at the time, Comrade Naledi, I knew you as that little girl in exile. I'm now the Madala, and you're still a little girl with fire and strength. And I said to her, Comrade Naledi, when Layla Khaled stood up and delivered a blow back in 1970 or so, we had, Layla, a solidarity meeting in Red Lion Square in London, and her father was speaking and praising you because we recognized, comrades, in the Palestinians what we were, what we came from, our dispossession, our right and humanity's right to stand up and resist, to resist that oppression, that slavery. And in international law, you have the right to rise up against occupation. Remind America.
Independiente como los Mao Mao, concluyente como los Mao Mao.
Como los Mao Mao.
Como los Mao Mao, somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
Yeah.
Independiente como los Mao Mao.
Sí.
Concluyente como los Mao Mao.
Como los Mao Mao.
Como los Mao Mao, somos resistentes como los Mao Mao.
We are all Gaza. If you can, Bouna, before our guest comes on, break down why that is a phrase that should be embedded in everybody at this current stage, where we are seeing for our eyes actual extermination camps in the wake of Gaza being bombarded and these bombs being dropped, weapons of mass destruction that are then used in other areas of the world. So if you can break down why that term is before we bring our guest on, your guest that you locked in. So thank you for that.
Remember, I talked to you about the South African Jews who joined the armed struggle of the majority of the people in South Africa, the black people, so who sacrificed their economic and racial privileges to fight for justice, equality, and freedom. And here you have, in that video that you just played, symbol, okay, of that Judeo-African, what I would call the Judeo-African revolutionary tradition, okay, because this is a tradition that has emerged in the continent of Africa, okay, and obviously Ronnie Casriels, that's his name, whose memoir really advised, it's titled Armed and Dangerous. It was published after the 1993, if I'm not mistaken. It's also available in Spanish, Armado y Peligroso. So he's one of the embodiments of that, tradition of fighting against oppression, including when it's, for a Jewish person who had the Jewish education, who was siding with the blacks, okay, against the majority of the South African Jewish community back then, and also the state of Israel, okay. Ronnie Casriels is a self-proclaimed anti-Zionist. That's why he's been one of the main targets of the South African pro-Israel lobby, including after October 7, because he's been accused of doing the apology of terrorism, quote unquote, and they have tried to use him in fora where they have been trying to rewrite or whitewash the history of that, of the Jewish diaspora in South Africa, making it look like the majority of the South African Jews were against apartheid, when in reality it was only minority, very active minority, those people who we consider as our elders, as Africans, despite the fact that they're not blacks themselves. These are white people who sacrifice their life, their privilege, their economic status for the sake of setting us free. So if Ronnie Casriels, based on his legacy, the commitment and the sacrifices that he has made, tells us that we all should be Gaza, I think it's very important for us not only to listen to his advice, but also apply it as much as we can.
Yeah, Fernando, you got any words in regards to the video we just watched?
No, man, I appreciate it. I think it's gonna be time to welcome our guest, right?
Yeah, Bouna, if you wanna welcome our guest before we bring him up to the stage, get everybody well acclimated with the work and the individual.
Yeah, so Coming-ness is a very, very, very special guest. We're very honored and privileged to have him here today. We thank him in advance for accepting our invitation. So he's one of the faces and voices of Palestinian resistance to Zionist colonialism. Our guest is a writer, organizer, political activist. He's currently based in Canada. Sorry, he has been in Vancouver, Canada. He has been a target of numerous smear campaigns in the West, character assassinations campaign in the West, aimed at silencing and criminalizing him and others like him, others Palestinian and non-Palestinian like him, who are fighting for Palestinian rights, especially those who are based in the diaspora. So in 2019, our guest was deported from Germany for his activism, and that is why he's currently based in Canada. He's a member of the executive committee of the Masr Badil, the Palestinian Alternative Revolution Path movement. So Khaled Barakat, that's the name of our guest. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the Rise Up Morning Show, an internationalist, Pan-African, an anti-colonial, and hopefully Palestinian morning show. Thank you, Khaled, and marhaba.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Thank you
welcome,
so
welcome.
much. Thank you. Thank you. And it's an honor to be with you.
We appreciate you.
Likewise, likewise.
So, Khaled, as you were coming in, you've tried to make a brief introduction to our audience of who you are and the work that you've been conducting. It's been a very brief introduction. It does not necessarily do justice to the work, important work that you've been carrying out for several decades. So, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself to the members of our audience who might not be familiar with your work.
Yes, my name is Khaled Barakat. I am a Palestinian born and raised in Jerusalem. I have been a worker most of my life as I did not continue my schooling. I have entered the workforce and the working class life at a very early age when I was maybe 11, 12 years old. And I have been kind of living between exile and the homeland for most of my life. But I am a worker and a writer at the same time. Many people don't believe that a worker could write, but we, workers could also write. I write regularly in Al-Akhbar daily newspaper in Lebanon. And before that, I also was part of the editorial team of a literature magazine, very important one in Lebanon. Unfortunately, it hasn't been out for a year since the departure of the founder of that magazine, comrade of ours. But I have been also writing in literature, short stories, and other. So that's really me, and the rest is an organizer for the liberation of Palestine.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. And again, thank you for being here on the Rise Up Morning Show with us. We appreciate your time very much. So we have a couple questions we'd love to ask you. So for almost 10 months now, the world has been witnessing a live televised genocide perpetrated by one of the most criminal and cruel states on planet Earth, a settler colonial regime which has been a key ally of the most oppressive regimes in the world, including apartheid South Africa. This genocide has been funded, condoned, and facilitated by the states. This genocide has been funded, and facilitated by states where some of us happen to live and where it is quite difficult to get accurate information. In this context, we would like to ask you, what is the current situation in Gaza right now as we speak, both in terms of human suffering, but also in terms of resistance to this genocide?
Yes, thank you for this question. This is really an important question because it links the Palestinian facing genocide and war crimes as one side of the story, and the other half is the Palestinian resistance of this genocide and these war crimes. And this is important because it gives a deeper context to the Palestinian struggle in Gaza and in Palestine and in exile as well, because Palestinians throughout their struggle, they have faced war crimes and genocide, displacement, dispossessions, all the crimes that we have seen in Gaza for the last 10 months at the hands of the Zionist regime and the Zionist army. We have also seen that even before the creation of the State of Israel at the hands of the Zionist gangs before May 15th, 1948. So Palestinians are not shocked because Israel is committing these crimes. This is the nature of Israel. They have been conducting these crimes for a very long time. However, the world is now watching and seeing, and more people are aware of the colonialist settler project called Israel in our homeland, and how dangerous Israel is, not just against the Palestinian people or the danger they pose on the region, but also Israel is a very dangerous entity to the world, because they want us to get used to war crimes and genocide as a natural thing, that we have to get used to it and just live with it. But of course, any resistance, any act of resistance becomes something that Israel and its Western allies, and especially the United States, they portray it as a crime that intolerable, and so they justify their war crimes because we resist, when resistance, in fact, is the natural response of against occupation, colonization, and so on and so forth. And I think that more people are seeing that the destruction of Gaza, the killing of over 50,000 Palestinians, we have 10,000 of our brothers and sisters or children under the rubble. And we have lost almost all of our universities, our hospitals. The infrastructure in Gaza has been destroyed because Zionists have a classic and a kind of a traditional practice that they do, and they justify this not just politically, but sometimes even using religious phrases, and that is to push the Palestinians into not just poverty but starvation. They legalize, preventing Palestinians from reaching water. When you see settlers in the West Bank burning olive trees and burning houses, this is something that they are very proud of. In fact, these are, they try to portray it as something even blessed by God. And they are doing this in order to turn the entire conflict in Palestine as a religious conflict, because this serves the Zionist discourse and serves the Zionist, narrative to show that the conflict is between, Jewish and Muslims, when in reality it's not. Also, in terms of resistance, the Israeli Zionist army have failed on all fronts in Gaza. They have failed in achieving any of the goals that they set publicly. They also failed on the goals that they did not declare publicly. And one of these goals were to displace the Palestinian people from Gaza and to push them into Sinai, into the desert, because they want to evacuate Gaza from its population. They look at Gaza and they refer to Gaza and our people in Gaza historically as a problem, as an obstacle, to the effect that prime ministers in the Zionist regime have said publicly, we wish that the sea will swallow Gaza. One day we will wake up and see Gaza's gone. They have advocated for this genocide and war crimes historically when it comes to Gaza. When you read even the memoir of someone like, the war criminal Moshe Dayan or Rabin or, Shamir, you would see in their own journal how much they want to see Gaza gone, because Gaza have a very rooted heritage in resistance. It did not start in October 7th. It is decades of struggle. And that's why in order to understand what's happening in Gaza, we must see the Israeli war crimes and genocide, but we also have to see how Palestinians have been resisting and how Israel has been failing in achieving its goals. They did not release any of their, captured settlers. They did not end the resistance. In fact, the Israeli army image as an army that is so powerful, so advanced in technology, the most number one, army in the region. All of that has been deteriorating on a daily basis due to the steadfastness and creativity of the Palestinian resistance, and that will put us on to why the heroic military offensive in October 7th have been carried by the Palestinian resistance that actually change the equation and the balance of power and change the world, really.
Thank you very much for that, Khaled. Before asking the second question, I just wanted to tell you an anecdote. I was studying in Malaysia a few years ago. I guess it was 2016, last time I went there. And I had very close Palestinian friends, okay? And one of them, he actually gave me a scarf that I'm wearing now. Maybe people cannot see. I have the kefir here, and I also have a scarf, right? So on this side, you can see the color, the kefir. And on this side, you can see scriptures in Arabic with the names. I'm going to share the screen. I don't know if people can see it.
Okay, it says Bethlehem.
Yeah, Bethlehem, also Al-Quds,
Al-Quds,
and many other cities. So it's the name of all Palestinian cities in Arabic.
Okay.
And he told me something in 2016. So when he gave me that scarf, he told me that I want you to be an ambassador of the Palestinian struggle wherever you go. Okay, so since then, whenever I'm going to demonstrations or any initiative in solidarity with the people of Palestine, I'll be wearing that scarf. So it's also a way for me to show appreciation to our brothers and sisters in Palestine who've been, resisting Zionist genocide for several decades now, and also, to show our sympathy with the genocide that they've been going through. Because the friend I'm talking about, he's still based in Malaysia, but he has lost many of his family members in Gaza. And back then, he was also telling me, the histories of some of his cousins being assassinated by Israeli snipers. So this is something that I've been familiar with for several years now, and I also wanted to take this opportunity to tell our brothers and sisters in Palestine that we're still with them.
We're glad to have you as our ambassador, Bouna.
I don't know how effective
you are much better than many Palestinian ambassadors.
Thank you for that, Khaled. I had a question about your overall assessment of the global movement of solidarity with the people of Palestine, which we have seen. It hasn't started on October 7th, obviously, in the genocidal campaign against people of Palestine, but October 7th has definitely been a turning point, okay? Because we've seen campuses and campaigns that practically did not exist before October 7th, and we've seen also that the campaigns to boycott Israel have also intensified, although it seems to have died down a bit since most of the universities are in summer vacation, I guess. But anyways, there has been a strong solidarity movement with the people of Palestine globally, not only in the Middle East, but also in the so-called Western countries where all of us are based. So I wanted to know, what is your overall assessment of this global solidarity movement in this context of post-October 7th, and what are the lessons that we should learn from it?
Yes, I think it's also, this is a central question. We don't much talk about it in terms of how to advance the solidarity campaigns and movement with Palestine, only especially in the last 10 months, because people have been busy organizing actions and in a very practical way. But I do think that it's very important to shed light on the political and theoretical understanding of what does solidarity movement means and what is solidarity campaigns with Palestine means, because it is often refer to the solidarity movement as if it's a one thing, a one united thing, and when it's not. It's actually a reflection of the Palestinian liberation movement. So you do see lines in solidarity with Palestine, but they are, they don't want to see settlements in the West Bank, but they don't have a problem if Israel still exists. There are solidarity groups that advocates for two-state solution, and they call themselves Solidarity. When we review two-state solution as a liquidation solution for the Palestinian cause. So we have to differentiate, not to, of course, we want to see a unity in the message of the solidarity movement, but just to understand it in a deeper level. And we can speak freely in programs like your program or in this setting because I feel home. So there is no reservation and no need to use any diplomatic terms in these kind of interviews. The important thing is that Palestine to be understood as not just a Palestinian cause or an Arab cause or a Muslim cause, it's also an international cause. It's all of that. And the powers that is involved, as you know, in the creation of the state of Israel and creating the miseries of the Palestinian people, establishing this colonialist criminal settler state, is a Western project. From the Balfour Declaration of 1917 up until today, Israel is a Western colony in the heart of the Arab world, in the heart of the Muslim world. So to see a strong solidarity movement with Palestine in Britain, for example, or in the United States or in Canada, that is people expressing their rejection to their own systems of oppression and imperialism, and saying that we don't want to be involved or complicit in these war crimes. So as much as it is in solidarity with the Palestinian people, but it is also a task of people where they live, in the belly of the beast and in the center of imperialism in Europe and in North America particularly. And that's why sometimes people say, well, there is a great historical solidarity movement with Palestine in South Africa, but that is natural because of the relationship between Palestine and South Africa, or Ireland, or Algeria, or people who have fought, colonialism. So people take these solidarity movements in Africa and Latin America as a natural response of people who are natural allies with the Palestinian people. So are we talking about solidarity campaigns in Europe and North America? And this is important to do this distinguished. Also to see that our people have been seeing, especially in the last 10 months, that there is the people who lives in Europe, from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America, are the one who's actually organizing for Palestine. So we cannot separate the struggle of our brothers and sisters in Europe and North America, Black liberation movement, Latino liberation movements in the belly of the beast, also leading and organizing and supporting the Palestinian struggle. And usually we don't, it's important to look at this in order to see how much we're connected in one struggle against imperialism, Zionism, and reactionary fascist regimes. And the more we clarify this, the more Palestine becomes central, but also other struggle becomes important as well. We want to see, for example, when you look at the funding that the United States and Canada and Europe is giving to Israel, people are saying, well, we're having issues here we're having a problem with funding education. We're having a problem with, workers are not getting enough support. We see how racism is happening when it comes to distribution of wealth in the United States between whites and blacks, and we see that these issues are not exactly irrelevant to the Palestinian people's struggle. And it is in the heart of the Palestinian struggle, and that's why it's important to look at solidarity movement with Palestine as also an integral part of an anti-imperialist movement, and not just something that hangs in the abstract sense, without any meaning. And if you just bring back, for example, the times of Malcolm X and, the 60s, the rise of the liberation movements in Africa, and they listen to us sometime, how we speak, they probably would be laughing sometimes, like, what are you talking about? Like, this is one struggle. Like, why do you have to prove that? Why do you have to keep talking about that? You're connected. You are connected, and that's because of the dismantling of causes, and it's something that imperialists have done, and not just they are responsible for that. Also, the national bourgeois and comprador and traitors in our area have also tried to portray that we have nothing to do with each other. Why should we support the struggle of Palestinians? If the Palestinian Authority wants to have one state in the West Bank and Gaza, why do we have to be more Palestinians than Palestinians? This discourse sometimes it's to dismantle the cause of an anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist struggle to a local one, because this serves the local ruling classes, whether here or whether it in our continents. So I do feel that our role here and the role that you're doing is actually becomes so important and strategic, because that builds the bridge that we need between our struggle in the belly of the beast and our struggle in our continents. And that is important to explain what solidarity movement do we want as Palestinians. And that becomes an important question for our liberation movement as well, to give that depth of internationalism to the Palestinian question.
Thank you for that. I like that you tied in Malcolm X, because earlier today, before you joined the conversation, we had a discussion about how African struggle is intrinsically connected with the Palestinian struggle. When you look at what's actively going on right now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and how there are connections to Israel there is connections to Israel in South Africa, which we have on this channel brought up many times. So I just want to say thank you for that, because it ties into the Encompass conversation. It encompasses everything that we've been talking about today. The question that I have for you is that we all know, that smear campaigns and character assassinations are, among the favorite, tactics, and dirty tricks that the Israeli, colonial state enacts on Palestinians, on anybody who speaks out on that. If you could, speak to, how this may have affected you in your work that you do, and how do we counteract this in the wake of, at the same time, standing in solidarity with Palestine, making sure that that's the primary narrative, but also combating false narratives and discredited assassinations against journalists like yourself, journalists like myself, people like Bouna, who I consider a journalist at this point, broadcast journalist, Fernando, just the work that we do to make sure that people know how connected struggle, anti-colonial struggle is, and Palestinian and African struggle are right there, hand in hand, fighting for liberation. So.
Yes, thank you for this question, because we have been also seeing the level of oppression and the rise of level of oppression. As the resistance rise, oppression rises, because, and it's a natural relationship, but we should also not to justify oppression and how to fight it. It's important that we fight it as collective and as a united front, because usually our enemies try to single out a person, an artist, a writer, an organizer, a revolutionary, and say he's the problem or she's the problem. And that, we don't have, they say we don't have a problem with Black people in the United States, but we have a problem with this individual. But in reality, they have a problem with everyone. They're targeting the struggle of an entire community, an entire nation. But they single out, and so the oppression becomes something, especially in the West. Israel doesn't care, they oppress the entire village and city and people, and they don't differentiate between anyone, because it's a different kind of level of oppression. But in the West, when I was deported, for example, from Germany, they said to me that we don't like your ideas. I mean, this is it's not because you did anything wrong or you have crossed any kind of illegal, you did anything illegal. We simply don't like you. But that's an extreme case of the German and how much the German state is connected to the Zionist movement. To the extent that sometimes some Israeli journalists could write an article in Haaretz, but it will not be published in a German newspaper. I mean, that's how Germany is so, supportive of the Zionist project. But in other areas, they might use different justification and say that, you have an extreme views, you are an anti-Semite, you are advocating for terrorism. So supporting the resistance becomes advocating for terrorism or glorifying terrorism. And the movement I am member of, the Masar Badil, the Alternative Revolutionary Path, we have in the last 10 months something like 50 cases in courts from Spain to Germany, to France, to Belgium, to Canada, and so on and so forth. And this is when the level of oppression rises, they cannot anymore justify that this is about an individual. Then it becomes about a movement and about a people and about a struggle. Now, how do we fight back? I think that it's important that we kind of build an anti-oppression campaigns, but not to be on the defensive, because what they want is they want you to be on the defensive. They want you to justify why you support the resistance. So you would change your language and you start speaking a different language, or be careful about how you say things. And gradually, this puts movements and individuals into a frame, of you have to be careful. You can't say this. For example, in Canada, we have the case of the international coordinator of Samidoun, Charlotte Cates, who said, "Long live October 7th." And, she said in a demonstration that she supports, the resistance of Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the PFLP, and she was banned by the police to participate in any kind of action. So other people have said it, but they did not. They were not targeted. So you can see that they single out certain activists or organizers that they don't want to see. They don't want to see them part of the community because they realize that they're effective. So they're not gonna, just do whatever. Like sometimes the Zionists say all kind of stuff. They never ban them. But when it comes to Palestinians and their supporters, oppression is there. But also it's important to see that sometimes media is so complicit in the West and in Europe that they make oppression not just justified, but they actually incite for oppression. They are the media is like so dirty, mainstream media, that they want the state to inflict more oppression, because this is something that it feeds them and it feeds their news, particularly in creating fear amongst communities that, oh, you have to be very careful. This guy is a brown, he's from somewhere in the Middle East, this guy is black, he's wearing a kufiya, he must be a terrorist. So this fear that they create is the most powerful tool that the state have. It's not prisons, it's not the law, it's that fear, because this put people in our community sort of in a box that they don't want to participate anymore because they're afraid of oppression. And at the same time, it creates, an imaginary monster amongst the general public that, oh, you have to be careful. These Africans, these Arabs, these Muslims are up to no good. And so, it's better to, and that's what gives people like Trump all this, support, even sometimes from poor white workers who would support Trump, because they have been conditioned to look at us as a problem, immigrants, refugees, so on and so forth. And that's why what you're doing is actually is our voice against that creating fear by saying that, well, there's an alternative media, and I think that more younger people are turning into media that expresses solidarity, respect, love, struggle, liberation. More and more younger generations are actually part of this now, and they understand, why oppression happens. My last point I want to make is that Palestinians have been involved in struggle to the extent that becoming a prisoner or a freed prisoner, or deported or expelled or oppressed, natural almost, when it is not supposed to be natural. But if you tell a Palestinian, I have been in prison, like Palestinians don't even talk about it, because 1 million Palestinians have entered Israeli prison since 1948. And so almost every Palestinian experienced imprisonment. These kind of oppression, it's so shared amongst Palestinians to the extent that sometimes we don't even talk about it. There is the other side of oppression that people like Malcolm X and Ghassan Kanafani and Frantz Fanon have talked about it, but we don't talk about it much, which is the silent wounds that we live and we don't talk about it. Like how many times have you seen people talking about their psychological or like how much they have lost on a personal level. People tend not to talk about these things because we think that it's secondary compared to what happens on the ground, the killings, the destruction, and all of that. So we don't talk about that silent ones, we keep it. And it's important that our revolutionary media, our literature, our poetry expresses that pain as well, because it shows the side not just of our determination of fighting and resisting, but also our human side on a collective level, on individual level.
Yes, and you let's piggy or go a couple steps back. You brought up something that was very, very important, very important. That was political prisoners. In the wake of Palestinian solidarity, global solidarity, we are seeing an overlook of the mass incarceration, the mass what we can classify now as stealing, and classifying as Palestinian political prisoners. If you could, in context, explain the importance that is for us to not overlook Palestinian political prisoners that are being subjugated to the worst amount of atrocities, actions. Just recently, a whole entire protest in Israel was conducted to free individuals that have been well known to physically rape and sodomize Palestinian prisoners. So if you could express your solidarity with getting individuals to understand, as a Palestinian, getting people to understand the importance of never to overlook the fact that while Israel is asking for them to free hostages, they are currently right now in the West Bank, collecting every Palestinian that they possibly can, and they have been doing so since the first Nakba. So if you can, break that down for individuals, the importance of understanding that through Palestinian solidarity and struggle, we always have to put at the forefront that there are political prisoners and hostages that have been taken by Israeli settler colonial forces.
Yes, because this is so important, because the history of the Palestinian struggle is the history of the struggle of Palestinian political prisoners. You can never separate the two. As long as occupation and colonization exist, prison is one of the manifestation of the colonialist and occupation, especially in the context of attacking the what we call the hardcore of the Palestinian liberation movement. These prisoners are the leaders of our student movement, our labor movement. These are our teachers, our doctors, our workers, the leaders of the Palestinian women movement. Israel, like any other colonialist entity, they come with prisons. In fact, they inherit prisons. If you look at the history of prisons, you would see that these prisons some of them were established by the Ottoman Empire when the Turks were ruling Palestine, and then they were inherited by the British and then by the Israelis. So even the history of the prison is the history of and that's why when people liberate their lands, these prisons becomes museums. Like in the case of South Lebanon, when you go to the prison of Al-Khiyam in South Lebanon, you'd see this prison had killed Lebanese, fighters and strugglers in that prison. But now, after liberation, it becomes a museum. The same in South Africa, where prisons also became part of our history. And so I wanted to say this general idea because I wanted to say that prisons and this stage of our struggle will eventually go with being victorious. If we're not victorious, prisons will remain. If Israel remains, the prisons will remain, oppression will remain. And that's why it's important to link that the total liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea mean ending of all of these suffering. And for Palestinians to have 1 million Palestinians entering these prisons, and when you look at the numbers of the Palestinians in Palestine, you would see that not just that almost every Palestinian family experienced that, but many Palestinians have experienced that many times. And I remember during the trial of the General Secretary of the PFLP, Comrade Ahmed Saadat, the judge told him, "How many times have you stood here and we have sentenced you? When are you going to learn the lesson?" You know, Israelis like to talk about how they want to teach us a lesson. And so Saadat responded to him how many times have you failed in breaking my will? Because this is, at the end, this is a representation of the Palestinian liberation movement in its totality, but in prison, in courts, and Zionist occupation represented by their so-called judicial system and courts. And this battle takes place in prison and in courts. Now, there is today almost 10,000 Palestinian prisoners. The number before October 7 was 5,000, so they doubled the number of Palestinian prisoners, including women. We had like 40 Palestinian political female prisoners. Now they're about 80. And Israel have assassinated and killed about 48 Palestinian prisoners inside prisons since October 7th, but Israel have assassinated over 300 Palestinian prisoners since 1967. And when you look at the names and the stories of these political prisoners, they are writers, journalists, poets, organizers, leaders, political leaders, academics, and so on and so forth. And it's almost like the experience of Steve Biko in South Africa, when at a time when there was a need for a youth radical revolutionary voice, and they saw that Steve Biko is a threat, they killed him in prison. He was a prisoner. Sometimes we don't calculate also the numbers of prisoners who they kill, but before they take them to prison. I mean, many Palestinians were killed and put in a mass graves after October 7th, but they were prisoners. We don't think, we don't tend to say that these are prisoners that were assassinated and killed and butchered. They don't have to be in prison for years. They can be, a prisoner for 1 hour. But after that, now a lot of people don't know much about the details of Palestinian political prisoners resisting inside prisons. Palestinian prisoners are very organized. And prison life is not something that Israel controls. Up until October 7th, all that struggle and achievements by the Palestinian prisoners, struggle, Israel have confiscated all of these rights because they, for example, books. Palestinian prisoners have entered general hunger strikes to be able to have their own libraries. Now they're taking books. They're stripping them from their books. Palestinians, even in prisons, have launched hunger strikes to get visitation from their families or their lawyers. And many sacrifices has been, happened in prisons because Palestinian prisoners wants to continue their education. And Israel never give Palestinian prisoners any kind of rights without a battle. You have to go into a battle in order for prisoners to achieve any rights. Today, the person who is in charge of the prison authority is Ben-Gvir, the war criminal and the right-wing fascist, who is advocating to execute Palestinian prisoners in order to make rooms for more Palestinian prisoners too, because they were discussing that the prisons are so crowded. And so he said, well, why don't we just kill some of them and make room for others? And these statements by these ministers, it shows that this has been always really their policies. The only difference is Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and these, these war criminals, they say it publicly. That's why Netanyahu sometime and his other ministers tells them, you can say it inside, closed meetings, but don't say it publicly. But actually, What Ben Gvir says, Netanyahu says. What Smotrich says, any other minister says. They just say it in closed rooms. And they really are targeting every Palestinian prisoners. The level of crimes that they are conducting inside these prisons is nothing compared to what has been released in the media. And there is also, they use them as a bargaining chip because, and not just as hostages, thousands of Palestinian hostages, but they're rarely mentioned when you hear the US position or Canada position, or if you ask, any official in Europe about the situation in Gaza, the very first thing they mention is the release of Israeli hostages, but nothing about the 10,000 Palestinian political prisoners. Not to mention that by the testimonies of these Israeli captured who were freed by the resistance, that they were treated with respect, their dignity was protected, because once they're under your mercy, you don't want to, kill or torture or any of this. Otherwise, we become like Zionists. But Palestinian prisoners, Palestinian resistance have treated them with respect and with dignity because they're under our mercy. And at the same time, it is important for us to liberate these prisoners, these Israeli prisoners, and liberate them from their racism. Because colonialists, the only way you liberate them is when you defeat them first, and then you release them. If they're defeated and they're under your mercy, and then you let them go, the entire system that they have been built in their minds deteriorate. It just deteriorate because, this whole discourse about Palestinian terrorism and Palestinians are killers and Palestinians are rapists and Palestinians are this and that, it just deteriorate with an actual experience by their own testimony. So it's important that to see that the resistance in Palestine is the opposite of the occupation, and therefore the liberation of Palestine is the alternative of what exists now in Palestine. Not just, and so prisoners are very important front for our people, and they are truly the genuine, legitimate representative of the Palestinian struggle in prisons.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. I would like to quote now a prominent Palestinian writer who's considered one of the most talented and brilliant writers of his generation, whose work has been translated in more than 17 languages. A writer and political activist, member of the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine. He was born in Palestine in 1936 and was assassinated by the Mossad on July 8, 1972, at the age of 36. His name is Ghassan Kanafani. Ghassan Kanafani. Ghassan Kanafani once said, "If we are unsuccessful defenders of the cause, then it is better for us to change the defenders and not to change the cause." Khaled, you've been very generous with your time, and we really appreciate that. As a final question, we wanted to ask you if you could talk about the significance of Ghassan Kanafani's legacy, not only for the Palestinian cause, but for the anti-colonial cause in the 21st century.
Yes, thank you so much for this question, especially these days when Israel is waging a campaign of assassination in Palestine and outside of Palestine. And the last, crimes that they have committed, which is the assassination of his brother Ismail Haniya, the head of the Politburo of Hamas movement in Tehran, and also the killing of Fuad Shukr. He is the commander, leader of Hezbollah forces in Lebanon. Ghassan Kanafani was assassinated, and along with him, his niece, Lamis Najm, she was also killed in the car bombing. She was 17, and he was taking her to register in the, she was beginning her first year in college. And they were very close on a personal level, that he dedicated some of his work and collections of short stories to Lamis. And it's important to remember Ghassan Kanafani and many others who have been assassinated by Israel, because it shows the nature of this colonialist entity. Why I'm saying this? Because there hasn't been a real work on the historical background of Israel assassination policies. But Zionists have conducted assassinations before the 1948, before the creation of the State of Israel. One of the Palestinian struggler who was assassinated, his name was Sami Taha. He was the leader of the Palestinian labor movement in Palestine in 1930s. And Michel Mitri, another Palestinian labor movement leader, was also assassinated. And later on, we would know that Zionist criminal gangs, along with the British government that was ruling Palestine at that time, Palestine was under the British mandate, they were killing Palestinian leaders of the Palestinian labor movement. Then in the 50s, there were the campaigns of assassination against Palestinian scholars and Palestinian scientists. In the 60s, there's something that Palestinians knows, and it's called Golda List. It's referring to Golda Meir, the prime minister of Israel then, who literally put a list of names that, and where these names were given to the Mossad and the Israeli intelligence to be assassinated. And one of those names were Ghassan Kanafani name. If you look at the list, you would see that they're all scholars, like Wa'il Zaitir, academic in Rome, like Mahmoud al-Hamshari, like Basil al-Kubaisi, assassinated in Paris, like Naim Khader, assassinated in Brussels. All these Palestinian writers, poets, and also Palestinian military commanders in Beirut. This campaign of assassination, one of the names on the top of that list was Ghassan Kanafani. And when he was killed, Golda Meir said, we just got rid of an entire military battalion, when Kanafani never used a gun. But assassination, we know that it is a policy that has been practiced by colonialists all over the world. We know of many leaders who were assassinated in Africa, in Latin America, you know, from Victor Gara in Chile to, Che, after being, arrested in Bolivia, they killed him. To many of the African leaders of the liberation movements in Africa and Asia. And so we know that this practice is not just limited to Israel, but Kanafani particularly have a unique case in terms of he was brilliant in taking the Palestinian message from as a liberation movement into the international scene. They were worried because he would be communicating with Black Panthers, with groups and radical revolutionaries across the world, the Japanese Red Army, the actual liberation movements, and talking about them and translating their work into Arabic and introducing them to the Palestinian struggle. And not just that, but also be involved in strengthening the relationship between the Palestinian liberation movement and international movement that Israel saw as a threat. The second thing is his writing. His writing would be read by the younger generations, and he was a very good writer when it comes to explaining some of the Palestinian people feelings and notions that he couldn't do it in a political essay. Something I mentioned earlier about Palestinian silent wounds. So if you go back to his novels, you would see that he's talking about the inner, in-depth Palestinians and how they actually feels, how they are interacting with the struggle, how they're fighting, what's their fears, what's their reality, and these kind of complicated ideas, you cannot express it in a lecture. You cannot express it in a political essay. It has to be written in a different form of art, whether in films or whether in novels or whether in short stories. And that's why we consider him to be the writer of the Palestinian conscience. I'll just give one quick example. His first novel when he was 23 years old was Men in the Sun, and it talks about 3 Palestinians who were suffocated and died in a tank as they were trying to go to Kuwait to look for jobs. And the message of the novel, throughout the novel, is that these are individuals who are so poor, they're looking for any kind of salvation, an individual salvation to help their families. But he wanted to say that being a Palestinian, the salvation is not about an individual, it's not about you, it's a collective, because your cause is the cause of many other people who are living your conditions. So yeah, you can try to solve your problems as an individual by go and look for a job in Kuwait, but that's not going to solve the problem, because you might end up dead in the desert. And he also have this character who is the leader kind of these people to smuggle them to Kuwait to look for a job. He was the truck driver, referring to the Palestinian traditional leadership and the Arab leadership, saying that they will lead you to desert, to your death, to your miseries. Don't trust them to lead you and to put you on that tank, in order for you to solve your problem. And it took some time for many Palestinians to actually like the novel. They didn't like the ending, to have 3 poor people dead, because in the 60s people were watching a lot of Indian movies and Egyptian movies where it's happy endings all the time. And so he was kind of no happy ending. Right. And so you have to wake up, and the call was for the revolution. That was written in 1963, and immediately after that we start seeing Palestinian youth getting involved in armed struggle. Many people consider Kanafani's second novel, What's Left to You, and many other novels that he's written. When you read it, you think that this guy just published it yesterday. This novel just came out from the print yesterday, because he's so present, so contemporary, so alive, that you would like listening to speeches of acts or speeches of African revolutionaries who would be talking about their situation. And sometimes it's like this guy is talking about what's happening now and not like 50, 60 years ago. It's also important to see that he was engaged not just as a writer, but he was also engaged in the armed struggle, not as a commander or a military guy. He always say, I don't know how to use a gun and I don't want to carry a gun. But everything he did, every word he wrote, every hour of his life was dedicated to the armed struggle. And he said that intellectuals, they don't have to be commanders and military fighters, but our work has to pour into the armed struggle. And because that's what really changes the equation and not our writing. Recently, I wrote an article about him and Gaza and the relationship between Kanafani and Gaza as he visited Gaza, for the first time in his life. And he talked about Gaza and the resistance then. And he have a very good understanding of why resistance in Gaza is different from any other, area in Palestine. And so we can talk a lot about Kanafani, but I think it's important to see that the reason Kanafani wrote what he wrote and did what he did is because he always believed that Palestinians will be victorious, but he always also believed that the cause of the Palestine is not just the cause of the Palestinian people. He said it is the cause of every revolutionary of our era. And so that's why I feel like Palestine can never be realized as a state, but it can be realized as a homeland. Palestine is not a state. Our struggle hasn't been because we want to have a Palestinian state in Palestine. Palestine is a homeland, and there's a huge difference between a homeland and a state. I think the Zionists are very much into a state. They want a state, but for us, we want the content. Palestine has been the homeland for the Palestinian people, and state does not really liberate you. There are so many states, and you ask people, are you liberated? You're not really liberated, even though you have ministries and you have all kinds of institutions and you have representatives and ambassadors all over the world, but you're not really free. But if you have a homeland that has sovereignty and that people are sovereign in that homeland and free, I think that's what freedom is about. So Ghassan Kanafani captured that, and he said the Palestinian state is a liquidationist process that will end our struggle. Our struggle is about liberation of Palestine and beyond, liberation of the Arab people and beyond, liberation of, humanity. I mean, that's basically the ideas. Palestine is that idea, and that's why it scares imperialists and colonialists. And people like Kanafani also was a threat, and that's why they had killed him.
Wow. This has been a very deep, profound conversation on this show. So we are very grateful to Khaled, Barakat for coming on the show. Hopefully we'll have you back as soon as you'll be available. I would like to appreciate your availability and flexibility because we've been preparing this interview for 2 weeks now. Sorry. And rise up Palestine, Tahya Palestine. And looking forward to talking to Khaled, deepening the issues that we've been discussing today. And
thank you. Thank you very much, Khaled. Thank you. Everybody, make sure you support Black Power Media. We'll see you Tuesday morning on the Rise Up Morning Show.
Rise up.
Rise up.
Sometimes the riot is a quiet one, or the battle is to love.